Hello and welcome. I'm your co-host, Zain Dhanani. We've got a new cut up for you this week. We missed last week. We took a little bit of a break, got some family time. It's okay because the Thursday games on Thanksgiving were kind of trash anyway. I'm joined here by my host, Steve O'Rourke. What's going on, man?
What's up, man? Yeah. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. It's good to be back. I think
All the fun greetings.
yeah, exactly. I'll like run through the gambit of them all. But I think the NFL knew that we deserved a break and deserved some time with family because yeah, we didn't really miss much in trying to review or talk about any of those teams. I think the Broncos would have been really the only one worth talking about. And that game was just it was interesting, but I just think it wouldn't have been as much fun as what it has been the last couple weeks and then this week as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the fun thing is that now we get to pivot a little bit instead of just talking about like the Thursday teams. We get to go into the playoffs, right? And we get to
Yeah.
actually think about some interesting teams that are doing new things this year and really try to cover where we think they can go, potentially think about like the future of that team. And the Chicago Bears are really a really, really interesting one because we saw what they were last year and how they've transitioned into probably one of the top five offenses in the league this year, from a numbers perspective, at least. And for most people, especially me, who lives in Chicago, you never would have thought that was possible with the personnel they had in place. They bring in Ben Johnson, with really interesting opportunity to get a guy that everybody's kind of anointed as like an offensive genius, and you never know how that's going to go when you then transition into being a head coach. They bring in Ben Johnson. First few things he decides to do is draft Colston Loveland, draft Luther Burton, drafted left tackle Ozzie Trapilo, and basically just retooled this entire offense. Make some trades for some offensive linemen as well. And we can't understate, like, we're going to talk about skill position players. We can't understate how important it was that they retooled that offensive line. But basically, just a completely different offense. It's like we're going from speaking gibberish to now going into English, and it's awesome to see. There's a ton of different players that we're going to talk about, but we're going to focus on some of the most important pieces from a fantasy angle, but also just real life football. Luther Burden, Caleb Williams, Colston Loveland, DJ Moore, and Rome Odunze, mainly from the pass offense perspective. We'll talk a little bit about the offensive line too, and then move into DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai as well. Anything else you want to say before we get going?
Yeah, just I think what really benefited Ben Johnson and what you're seeing this year is that he came into a unique situation in that you do have Caleb Williams in place, which not often does a new head coach get handed like a really good quarterback, but also the defense was pretty well in place, and they've had their ups and downs this year, and they have a susceptibility to get points put up on them, but this was a good defense last year, and it's pretty similar in that like they're a very opportunistic defense. They take advantage of mistakes and they force a lot of turnovers. I mean, I think Al Harris being the defensive backs coach there, like he was king of taking advantage of picks. I think like that Packers secondary with him and Mike McKenzie, they used to create a lot of picks, but then on the flip side, there were big plays that went along with it. But like that's just how they live, and it works out. So like it was kind of massive to his benefit, and like why he ended up waiting so long to take a head coaching job is that he fell into it where it's like in one off season he can just run down the gambit and get all of the guys that he wants in place on his offense to have it not really skip a beat from him moving from Detroit, where like when he first came in, that offense was pretty set and ready to go. And then this as well, he gets to kind of jump in as the play caller, as the offensive mind, and have an offense like ready to go for him, which you don't see too often for a new head coach in a new situation.
Yeah, and I think it's unique just because you're able to say, hey, like we had some pieces in place, they're interesting pieces, but we also have some really nice picks, right? Because the trade that just keeps giving, the Bryce Young trade, allowed them to then get more pieces to the puzzle. They then the next year they end up getting Caleb Williams, and this year they're able to get an extra pick out of it as well, and use one of those picks to get a Luther Burden. Life's good when you make moves like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's as much as like I like it's such an easy comparison to make, and I think everybody does it, but I mean, it's what launched Detroit initially, and it's what's launching Chicago now is like hitting on drafts like changes the complexion of your team so quickly. And
Yeah.
they hit the ground running. They're getting like usefulness out of almost like all of their upper tier draft picks that they went for, and they're like contributing in a big way. So I think just like that, like it just shows how beneficial the draft can be when you hit on 3 or 4 guys in a
Yeah.
7 to 10 pick draft.
I don't want to go too much into it, but my tangent that I want to go back on for just this segment is I always think about how I would want to build a team when I draft a new quarterback, right? Everybody
Yeah.
anointed Caleb Williams as like one of these generational prospects. He has a lot of great traits. We'll talk about him more and all of the traits that he has and some of his deficiencies as well. But the main thing that I always think about is how do you set them up for success? A lot of times when a quarterback gets drafted 1 overall, you're going into a really terrible situation. You don't have very many weapons. Your offensive line is kind of shoddy. And maybe the coaching staff is also shoddy because they might give someone another chance because they didn't originally have a chance with whatever quarterback they inherited. And then you're in a situation where nobody is sure if they even want the head coach around, and you end up in a spot kind of like Eberflus did last year, right? They retool everything. They bring in Ben Johnson, what everybody thought was an offensive genius. They shore up the offensive line. They get weapons for him, and that to me is like the ideal way to build a team. The Raiders are going to they're going to be number 1 on the clock most likely, and they're going to probably draft Mendoza number 1 overall. At least that's what everybody's saying. Their offensive line's kind of garbage. They have Brock Bowers, and then I can't really say much about any of the other weapons that they have. The way that I would go about it is you just got to put more things together to build the recipe of how you can build success for a young quarterback. And the Bears did a great job of doing that. So that's the reason why we're going to talk about them today. One of the weapons that they brought in coming off this incredible Sunday Night Football game that we just watched is Luther Burden. Breakout game, best game he's had as an NFL player. I'm interested to see. A lot of people like to make some comparisons about him and what role he plays in the Lions offense. I said it on Twitter. You said it on Twitter as well. We've talked about it before. He kind of fits into this Amon-Ra St. Brown role, but I'm curious, like what you're seeing out of him. Routes, is he a good route runner? He's obviously a playmaker with the ball in his hands.
Yeah, I agree that I think like it's so cheap to go after and say like, okay, the Lions are like the blueprint, but they really are. And as much as not every guy's the same, I think Luther Burden is a faster Amon Ra. I think Amon Ra is a little bit more physical, but Luther Burden makes up for the like less physicality with having more speed. And so like one of the big things that I think a lot of people thought coming out was that he's going to be really good in, some design stuff, some underneath stuff. And Ben Johnson does that with him. He does like to work him underneath, but he does like to do it in funky ways where he will throw Burden in the backfield, like in this situation, and try and get him matched up on a linebacker. That was something that Ben Johnson did with Amon-Ra in Detroit. It's something that a lot of coaches are utilizing more, and it usually kind of points to who does the coach trust the most to win in space. You usually see it with Justin Jefferson. You've seen it with Stephon Diggs. You've seen it with Amon-Ra. You've seen it with Jamar Chase, all guys that win in space. And so Ben Johnson likes to get his guys easy targets. And one way to get easy targets is you get a nickel formation, you get five men up on the line of scrimmage, and you have Luther Burden in the backfield. It kind of guarantees you, with the 4 wide being pretty spread out, it pretty much guarantees the offense that Burden's probably going to see a one-on-one in the middle of the field. And that's exactly what happens. And he probably just gets a choice route. He can break in, he can break out. He breaks out and he burns the linebacker, gets upfield. It's an easy target. And
not to mention being in the backfield, you're in a nickel formation. You're most likely getting a linebacker also.
Right. Right.
So,
and so I think that one is just one way that I think Ben Johnson is starting to show his trust in Luther Burden. But then also just I think his route running has improved compared to what he was at Missouri. Even when he was in Missouri, like a lot of his touches were manufactured. A lot of it was underneath. He would have some over the top stuff and like deep balls, but he really didn't work the middle of the field a ton, which that's where Ben Johnson's offense wants to operate. They want to attack the middle of the field, the intermediate level of the field on non-designed throws. This year, Caleb Williams has an 8 out of 10.6. So it just shows like where they want to go. And that's they want to attack 10, like first down and above. They're trying to make plays. And I think Luther Burden just kind of took some time to develop. But like even against the game in Pittsburgh, you started to see that development start to show, and why he deserved more routes is just that he has now this
Bottom of
is
the screen, right?
yeah, bottom of the screen. He gets a decent cushion coverage, and this is also helped out by the fact that the Bears have a really good run game this year. Ben Johnson works play action and marries his play action to his run game better than most outside of Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay. He's up in the top 3, but Luther Burden is just really fluid. He's a very fluid. He doesn't lose a lot of steps. This look like he does get a good cushion, and I don't know that I'd necessarily give him a positive 1 score on like separation here. Like if we were going to grade him, but he's very fluid with his in cuts, and he goes and he misses the ball. The ball's a little high, but that I think is what is his biggest thing, is that he's on a straight line down the middle. It's pretty fluid in and out, and you can see it on his out routes too. I think working with Antoine Randall, you can see a similarity in the way that Luther Burden and like Detroit and even like all Chicago receivers, really, you can see a little similarity this year in their route running on how they work digs and outs on their breaks. It looks pretty similar to how Detroit works theirs. And I'd like they have the same coach, and it's paying dividends. You're getting a lot of like really good moves. And this is from this last week game of Luther Burden down at the bottom of the screen. He motions in, he's going to do a kind of like a blaze out, and he just understands how to work corner, understands leverage, understands how to get that little push off at the top of his route, and he's fast. And so I think that like what we're seeing with the evolution of his intermediate game, his 10 to 20 yard route running, is where he's earning more and more of his opportunities.
I think it's really interesting. So the clip that you showed before where he was going in motion and then they did like a little bit of a switch in the secondary and then he was able to come back out. I was thinking about that concept in general and how we had basically just talked about roughly the same thing with Puka 2 weeks ago, where it's like, hey, this guy Puka was doing it from the middle of the line, the offensive line. So it's a little bit different, but it's the move motion player that's like running full speed and then able to do like quick out in, like just basically creating space in the offense for this guy to operate and basically be open. And it seems like Burden's taking on that role for the Chicago offense. Great role for him to be in, because I think we both believe he's got great yak abilities as well.
Yeah.
But it can pay dividends from many different angles. It means that even if he's not the best route runner, he can still be open, be that underneath option for Caleb. And then you put him in space with secondary people and linebackers, and he's able to get a couple extra yards. Sometimes he could break one.
Yeah. And I think it's just that he is becoming a much better route runner, and he's just, it's his ability that he's learned to not lose ground, not lose steps in his breaks. A lot of his breaks are coming at full speed, and he understands how to lean into him. And it's how he like create. He's a slot right at the top of the screen, and you can just see how he's able to get in and out of his breaks so quickly. It's really impressive, and it's how he's been able to win so much. The ball doesn't end up going to him here, but it's why Caleb has started to lean on him on some of these deep and intermediate routes, is that he's started to learn that ability to not lose any steps on his in and out breaks and really like lean into the break and it's paying dividends. And I think that was his biggest thing. Like I said, coming out of Missouri, is that I didn't know how he'd translate as a intermediate route runner. Sometimes like fast guys end up relying too much on their speed, and what he's learned to do is learned to make a break with his speed, which not a lot of guys are able to do. And so again, like this is another post route, but he's smart in that he learns how to leverage corners, he learns how to read eyes, and this is a cover three hole, so it's not a ton, but I think that the timing is there, and you can see that he's breaking down under like flatter on his post route rather than more upfield to get into that hole more. So it's just he's understanding, and I think he's learning the offense more. He's learning placement more, and then on top of that, when he gets into one-on-one situations, he knows how to use his speed to win. And then also this is what he kind of was going to be like, again, what I thought he was going to be used for coming out right away is a lot of design and different gadget plays. And Ben Johnson's one of the best gadget play designers. I think here it's like they're going to run a reverse. And a lot of times what you see with offenses is they'll run a motion with reverse. Like usually like a guy will motion in at some point and it'll end up turning into a reverse. Ben Johnson's smart and he does it from a static formation. But then again, just give Luther Burden an opportunity, give him to get the ball in his hands, run a good scheme, and he can do the rest because he does have that elite make you miss talent and speed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the things that a lot of like the fantasy community and other NFL junkies have been interested in with him is, he started off the season not necessarily playing that much. And a lot of people really, really thought, hey, they're going to go 11 personnel and he'll be out there. And
Yeah.
There's been this whole thing with Olamide Zaccheaus that's been out there instead. Is there something that's changed with Luther Burden that you feel is driving the fact that he's on the field more? I mean, obviously Rome Odunze is out, which helps him move up in the pecking order too.
Yeah.
But do you feel like there's something where it just took him a little bit of time to figure out his like role, or a little bit of time for him to pick up some like nuances with some of his route running that you saw from beginning of end to season?
Yeah, I think it is his ability to win in the middle of the field. I think that they know that he can win and get out and win underneath and be underneath and work the ball after the catch, but that's not all they want him to do. They want him to be a threat downfield towards in the middle of the field, intermediate level. And I think that's where he has developed the most, is just like his timing, his efficiency on his cuts, where he lands on the field, like even just on his dig routes, you can see he's pretty good. Like lately in the season, he's pretty consistently flat down a line. And, that all factors into timing with quarterbacks and everything. Is when guys start to drift, that's when interceptions happen. And when in those couple of clips that I showed with like dig routes, he's flat down the line, which is a big deal. And it was something that I don't think that he was necessarily doing at a great level earlier in the season. And I think that's all started to kind of, I think it's intangibles and just like fine tuning and controlling the speed and the athleticism that he has, and working it into the timing of the offense and working it into being able to work with Caleb. And he's good in scramble drill. He understands where to go. And I think that's what's really good about a lot of these Chicago receivers, is they all understand scramble drill pretty well. And he's one that he kind of is starting to understand where to find and see open space and zones.
Yeah. That kind of leads me to my next guy. So Luther Burden kind of had his breakout game this past week. Then earlier in the season, we had what we thought was our like clear number one option in the offense for the Bears in Rome Odunze. Now he's been missing the past, like, I don't know, I think 4 weeks now, potentially 5.
Yeah.
And he's probably not going to be playing in week 18 either. I'm curious your thoughts on like what role he plays in the offense. Does he have some similarities to anything that Ben Johnson's done in the past with like potentially Jameson Williams, or where do you see his fit in the offense moving forward?
So I think what Ben Johnson is doing differently a little bit with having Luther Burden there and having Rome Odunze is that, like, I think those two are, how do I put this? They're less archetypical compared to like Amon-Ra and Jameson, where I think JMO you could categorize as like a legitimate speedster, and Amon-Ra your possession guy. Like I think they kind of fit into those archetypes. Whereas I think Burden and Odunze kind of are not. They're a little bit a blend of both of those, where they both can be big possession guys. Luther Burden's not huge, but he can play bigger body. But and then Odunze, he's quick, but he also can do the underneath physicality stuff. So I think like Odunze and Burden are going to be kind of interchangeable. All that to say that is that like it's a good problem to have, in that I think they're going to have to figure out how to work touches in for all these guys in this offense. But Odunze and Burden operate similar spaces. It's the intermediate. Odunze is there to like push the field and win at the intermediate and deep level. And it's a credit to his route running. I think he's evolved a ton as a route runner this year, where he was good at winning really deep routes last year. Like he would win sevens, he would win post routes, but where he kind of struggled was, a little bit underneath and then a little bit with like dig routes. I think that he kind of an issue that a lot of guys have is just losing steps, false steps in your routes. And again, you can see the similarities in how Burden runs the route, how Odunze runs the route. If you go and watch Detroit film, you can see it with how Jameson runs dig routes. You can see it with how Amon-Ra is that like they're really quick in and out of their routes, and where Odunze doesn't necessarily have that like insane speed. So he's breaks it down, but he understands how to stack corners. So where he may not have the super insane like quickness, what he does have is he has long speed and he understands how to set up corners. So here he's able to win off the line, get on top of the corner, and then he kind of widens out and stacks the corner. And from there, he understands that he has a two-way go on this corner. The corner's directly behind him. The corner doesn't know if he's going in or out. And so he sets him up, breaks it down, and just he knows where he's going. The corner doesn't. He wins inside. And so I think he's going to be like, I think this Bears offense gets even more vertical when Odunze comes back, and if Burden continues to increase his route share. Is that like now you've got DJ Moore, Burden, and Odunze, who are all legitimate route runners and legitimate like winners at like 10, 15, 20 yards. And Odunze is really good at winning outside as well. And where on the last one he had press coverage, he had to stack the corner. He broke it down to the top. Here he's got a corner safety sitting over the top of him. He's not going to be able to close the space and get him like broken down as much. So he has to speed cut, and he's lossless in and out of the speed cut, wins outside, and is able to like, you can see when he makes his cut is when he could see the corner kind of stop his feet. His hips are turned inside looking at the quarterback. And so that's when like once he closes the space, has the corners or the safety corners, hips flipped a little bit. That's when he makes his break, and it's clean in and out, and he makes a good catch.
Yeah. One of the things that I think a lot of people have been questioning about Rome is that first couple of weeks of the season, he was clearly like their number one option in the offense. He was doing everything out there, putting up incredible numbers. Then we get a little bit closer to the midseason. One, there may have been injuries that were kind of hampering him. Obviously, he may have played through some things, and now he's actually out. Two, the numbers started declining, but they also started playing in weather conditions that like changes the trajectory of like where offenses may design the ball to go to. So I'm curious on your perspective, like, is he a guy that you think could develop into this like dominant number one option, or is it going to be like less consistent kind of week to week? And you can even, I mean, for me, the hard thing is like factoring in the fact that he plays in Chicago and Green Bay sometimes, like, and those types of like conditions sometimes elicit a guy that's doing like deeper and intermediate routes to just not get the ball as much because it's harder to throw and there's wind and rain and snow and all sorts of different things. But I'm curious your perspective on if he's truly like their dominant number one, or if it's like or is he going to be more of the inconsistent contributor?
Like, that's a great question, but I think he is I think he can be a number one, and he will be a number one. but I think that you're also right in that his role can be impacted. And it's just a matter of there's only one ball on the field and they're like their weapons with Burden and Loveland coming along. All of a sudden you've got six legitimate guys in the offense that deserve touches, in some way, shape, or form between the two running backs, Loveland, and then DJ Moore, Odunze, and Burden. And then even like the other guys have their usefulness. But I think it's just the role that he plays and that he is the guy that's going to push down the field. He is the guy that, is running more vertical routes because he can and has won so often vertically. I think that's where it is his role, that it will end up being his downfall in the sense of consistency. I think like you saw it with JMO at times. I think O'Dunes is similar to that, and that he is a 1A, 1B type of guy. It's just that the space that he operates in, it can get taken away if Caleb is under pressure. It can get taken away if teams do end up playing super deep zones, trying to take away the middle of the field, trying to take away the deep part of the field. That's where he could his contribution in being a number one doesn't show up on the stat sheet. It ends up showing up in that other guys will end up producing outside of him, if that
It's
makes
funny.
sense.
It's funny. I literally just got breaking news. So I subscribe to like all the Bears stuff.
Yeah.
Because I live in Chicago. So I'm always curious. Rome returned to practice today. This was the first time practicing in like 4 weeks. So
Yeah. I mean,
we may actually see it manifest and see like him be out on the field. But I
yeah,
agree with you when it comes to some of this stuff. Like Ben Johnson's a great offensive mind. There's no doubt about that. He's not going to design a game plan where it's like, hey, I need to force this thing to Rome. Like it's going to
exactly.
there's many options on the table. The easiest option is usually going to be the underneath options that are just designed 5-yard outs and drag routes and different things like that. And that's for the future, from my perspective, that's probably going to be Burden. You're going to see more consistency of a guy like him getting like 5 receptions in a game than Rome, but Rome's
Yeah.
probably going to have the bigger, like deeper, long plays. And that's not to say that they're both like in this specific, like Amon Ra versus JMO specific role, but it's more like when you run deeper routes, you're going to have more volatility in general.
Yeah.
And then you factor in the fact that you've got a guy like Caleb Williams throwing the ball, and we'll talk about him. The throws aren't always going to be completely accurate either. So there's some times where those deeper throws, even the underneath throws have been kind of like wildly inconsistent too, but those deeper throws are just going to be a little bit more challenging, especially in weather. And you may not get the blow up performance you were thinking. From a fantasy angle, I also think about the fact that they play in weather quite a bit. And when you get deeper into the season, those deeper balls are a little bit tougher to complete.
Yeah.
And so, again, you may see Rome come out hot some seasons and he does really well. And then that starts to tail off when you start getting into the windy times of the year or the rain and snow. And that's just something that you may have to deal with. If you're thinking about from a dynasty perspective and your championships are always at the end of the season, it's tough. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tougher for a guy like Rome and the things that they like to do with him right now to be like crushing at that time of year. And I think you'll probably end up seeing a guy like Luther Burden have stronger performances to the when you get closer to the end of the season, because the team will naturally start leaning on running more, and they will probably lean on doing these kind of nicer, easier underneath routes.
And that's not to say, I mean, shoot, even if you look at it, like obviously O'Dunes has been out for a while, but like the trajectory that he was on was still a guy that, should be in your starting line, or, was nearing the point where you should argue you should be in your starting lineup every week. And I think that like if you look at like JMO with, he has some inconsistencies, but he was still wide receiver 12 this year. Like that's what Rome can end up being. And I think as Caleb improves, that ceiling that he has continues to rise, because I think he has a super high ceiling. But it like I like think he's going to continue to evolve, and he's going to be a guy that's going to get 7 targets a game like no matter what. Doesn't matter. Like I don't think it necessarily matters the weather. Like Ben Johnson is always going to have the ability to scheme things open in the middle of the field and scheme space in the middle of the field or like even on out routes, he's becoming a guy that if you isolate him one-on-one with the corner and like man coverage or even just like a deep like a cover four or some type of match situation, like he's getting to the point where you can trust him to win one-on-one most of the time. And so like I think like, yes, he'll have his 1 or 2 weeks where it really dips, but like if he stays healthy and as he continues to grow, like next year, I still think he's a guy where he probably ends up over 1,000 yards. It's probably not on like a ton of catches, and he'll continue to produce really well. All that to say,
Absolutely. Then we talk about we mentioned this a little bit, but some of the inconsistency out of Caleb Williams has the highlight reel plays. We've all seen them. I mean, I live in Chicago. I see them all the time. And it's been fun to watch a lot of their games. And he obviously has a lot of unique abilities when it comes to scrambling, getting out of tricky situations in the pocket, making throws on the run, things that are traits that you just can't like teach. Those are things that he has innate talent that's incredible to do all of those things. But then there's the simple things that we see from time to time. In fact, we saw some in the latest game against the 49ers where guys are kind of open. The ball's just not in the right spot. It's a little bit too high. It's a little bit too wide. What do you think's going on with Caleb, and how do you kind of evaluate him?
with the underneath stuff, I think that he just relies on his athleticism, and I think sometimes just lets it fly like who cares? I can get it out there. I don't necessarily know that for sure, but like, and then just kind of what it looks like is that when he's throwing underneath stuff, it kind of just looks like he puts less effort into his mechanics. But then also like a big part of what people have talked about is like just his overall like low catchable ball rate. And I think a big part of that is also like the windows he tries to hit into. And with him just being a gunslinger, like honestly, I think that like from an arm talent and in the pocket perspective, like he reminds me of Matthew Stafford in a way of just like Stafford has it too, where he's just constantly trying to pepper really small windows or, tight windows to try to make a big play. And that's what Caleb does too, is just that like when he does get a decent pocket, he wants to rip it, but he just misses sometimes. It's just whether it's wrong spot, whether it's him, I don't know whether it's him like feeling pressure a little bit too much or just not getting it all the way, but like he wants to hit these like, and that was just an open window, but like here's one that he does hit, but he just like when it's off, it's off, but when it's on, like here he can layer it in really well. But like those are also what Ben Johnson's asking him to do on a consistent basis is when it's not a design throw, like he's here to push the ball down the field. And like you can just see where that but like the clean pocket stuff, it just I'm not a quarterback coach and I'm not a huge quarterback mechanics guy, but it's just like things just look slightly off and he just misses a spot sometimes. And we saw it on that Luther Burden dig route too, where he just sails it high sometimes. And I think it's just, I don't know if it's just, I don't even know what it is, but that like, I think it's where he's asked to put the ball consistently lends to more passes going errant just by the sheer distance. And then I think he just needs like underneath stuff. I think it's really just needing to clean up footwork and setting his feet when he's going underneath instead of like the kind of like flailing off the back foot throwaway stuff that he does every once in a while.
Yeah. And the accuracy things, it's tough, right? Because we've seen guys that come out that have similar types of skill sets. Josh Allen's kind of like a somewhat comp that you could be like, hey, this guy wasn't like super accurate, but
yeah,
he's got all of this like athletic ability. Guys have done it. I think it's harder to become more accurate than to figure out ways to make your throw power a little bit better, right?
Yeah.
Being able to drive the ball downfield. There's mechanical things that you can do and strength that you can generate that can like help you drive the ball a little bit further or faster down
Yeah.
the field.
But I think the biggest thing for him is that even though he has those errant throws, he might not be the most accurate quarterback ever. It might never happen. It might just be who he is. But what he's done from last year to this year is just his ability to move in the pocket and feel pressure, understand when to run in like situations like this where he understands. Like, I think his evolution of learning how to work a pocket is better than ever. Where like last year, a lot of what he was doing in situations like this where he starts to feel enclosed is he's spinning, but he would spin backwards and out, which is what he did in college because he was more athletic than everyone. It was usually always spinning out back, trying to get out wide, let chaos ensue, and then find a guy out of there. But now this year, I think what you're seeing is like situations like this where he's a lot more calm. He's moving up in the pocket and he's being more decisive with when to run. And so like that's I think Ben and like you saw it with you saw it with like this deep throw to Loveland last week is just that his ability to navigate the pocket and like stay upright and understand where to move and where to like not just take off and set his feet and get it downfield. That's been the biggest difference. And like that evolution, I think trumps and will negates in a way his inaccuracies.
Yeah, the other thing that I always think about with the quarterbacks too is that especially because we've seen so much success out of some quarterbacks like year one in the NFL and year two lately, because of the way people are able to potentially set them up for success through like scheming things or whatever it is. We saw like CJ Stroud have a great statistical season. Jaden Daniel had a great season last year. So we're accustomed to now seeing like guys just be good immediately. It doesn't, and we've also seen them then struggle the next year or whatever it is. I think we're just going to see some inconsistencies. These quarterbacks are super young. Brett Whitefield just talked about it on a separate podcast, and I feel like I've talked about it with friends a billion times, but it takes a while for these quarterbacks to master the role. This is like the one position in the NFL that takes way longer to master than others.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about guys that are in like their lower 20s, and there's so many of those in the league. We talked about this on a previous pod as well. So many of those in the league right now. It takes multiple years for these guys to finally like come into their own. And I don't think this is not like the height of Caleb Williams will probably come in his late 20s because he'll still have the athletic ability, but the mind will be there. He'll probably clean up some of his footwork as well. And we're probably going to see something that ends up being like, I still hold out hope that he could probably be one of the best quarterbacks in the league only because he has so many of the tools. There's still things to clean up, but there's still opportunity for him to clean up those gaps right now and become just an incredible playmaker because he has the physical skills to drive the ball down the field, can throw on the run, make the highlight reel plays, and then his ability with his legs in the pocket to navigate and potentially avoid sacks kind of get maybe the same way like a Patrick Mahomes does in the pocket sometimes, but then being able to take off and like there's actually I think there was a play earlier this season. I can't remember if it was against the Bengals or who it was, but he makes a play with his feet and he runs past defensive backs to score a touchdown. He's fast. He didn't run in the combine, but he's super fast. Very athletic player. So there's different ways that he can win than your traditional quarterbacks that you're accustomed to as well. And it presents a different way of teams needing to defend that. And it can create opportunities that are different than your traditional Jared Goffs and Matthew Staffords.
Yeah, and I don't even think it's holding out hope. I think that the hope is 100% warranted because I don't think it also gets enough credit that how much had to be broken down that from like what happened in the circumstances he was in last year and the habits he started to develop because of the offensive line situation, because of the overall talent situation around him kind of was waning. That takes a lot to unpack and retool in a young quarterback, especially where he was coming from a similar situation and he was doing the same, like similar things as in at USC as he was doing in Chicago's first year. And so like to break all that down and rebuild it, like the fact that he's gotten to where he's at like now in the year where San Francisco's struggled a little bit, but like had a really good game in San Francisco. And overall in the back half of the season, I think he's looked better. I think he's had spots where, like beginning of the Green Bay game, it kind of struggled that the weather was crazy, but like he's stepped up in moments that he needs to, and you've seen like a massive growth for him. So like really just the kind of tip of the iceberg for him. It's, as as an NFC North fan in the Lions, like I hate what I like. It's incredible what he's turning into, because I think it's like the sky's only the limit as he continues to weed out some of the overreactiveness instinct in the pocket, where he still has a little bit of that, like he feels the pocket breaking down and he escapes a little bit too soon and he gets himself into precarious situations every once in a while. As that like instinct starts to go away because of the system he's in, because of the offensive line that he's working with, and because of the overall structure of the offense, I think like he will only continue to like really, really improve.
Completely agree. We also have to talk about the other weapons that are in the offense, right? So they drafted Colston Loveland 10th overall, and now people want to also compare him to Sam Laporta
Yeah.
because of the Ben Johnson connection and the athleticism that we've seen out of Colston Loveland. They've kind of brought Loveland on a little bit slowly as compared to like how Laporta was kind of just forced into an every down kind of role.
Yeah.
But I think it's because they have adequate tight end play already with Cole Kmet, who's a solid tight end in the NFL.
Yeah.
And I think what they've done is they've kind of pivoted Kmet to being into more of like the not traditional like inline tight end, but more of like a slot tight end. And that's just the way that they've designed it. So when they are playing like more of like a traditional like 11 personnel with one tight end in, Kmet sometimes plays that role more often, depending on if it's attached to the line of scrimmage or if it's in the slot. And then whenever there's a 12 personnel situation, you'll probably see Loveland in the offense, not attached to the line of scrimmage, but more so like in the slot and running routes out of that. What have you seen out of Loveland? How does he fit? Does he have some similarities to Sam Laporta? Are they using him similarly, or what are you seeing?
I think that Colston Loveland's a little bit different from Sam Laporta, and that I think he's a better route runner and he's a better receiver, probably a little bit better receiver down the field as like an actual receiver rather than a guy working out of in line and tight to the line. But I think he works a little bit better down the field. Whereas I don't like what I think contributed to him not getting on the field as often is that his run blocking wasn't probably I don't think was up to par for what Ben Johnson wants in a starting tight end. But it also like with his development, it has evolved into, you've seen Chicago go a little bit more heavy personnel because of what he offers as a route runner and his mismatch ability and Ben Johnson's offensive creativity. He now offers them an intermediate threat out of heavy personnel. And so he's outside tight end here. And Ben Johnson, he's a big dagger concept guy. And so this is just kind of a work off of a dagger concept in that like usually you have a seam kind of running across a seam, crossing routes, running across the field. Then you have the in route breaking in out. But here you got Loveland, who's a good route runner who can press the inside defender and create space for himself by running a really good like blaze out here, influencing the deep safety enough where he's downfield, he's not going to be able to drive on the ball, and then really being able to drive this opposite side safety that's supposed to be kind of gathering him. He does a really good job of breaking out off of that. And then Caleb's really good at layering. Like when he's on, he's on. And these are the this is why I think like the inaccuracy things aren't as big of a deal, because of the windows that he threatens. And when he does hit, it's legit. And he's got a guy like Loveland who can go up and absorb a hit like that and make him play. And that's where they can also work him big as like a big slot receiver one-on-one against safeties. Like that's a huge mismatch. Loveland's athletic enough, and he's also big enough that he can win in situations like this where you get him ISO'd and he can win a post route because he's fast enough to force the defender to drop back and flip his hips a little bit. Then he's big enough to just like create just enough space and make a big contested catch against safety like that. And they also like to this is another one that Ben Johnson likes to do. He did it with Sam Laporta quite a bit, and he's done it with Colston Loveland. Is they'll push down the field all game, and like in a situation like this, this was end of the game against San Francisco. There's like 33 seconds left. It's 4th and 5, and the protection is great, but they love to do, or Ben Johnson loves to do this where he sits either a running back or a tight end underneath and just pushes everybody deep and just kind of like sends the two outside guys deep, sends a deep crossover, wanting to try to pull the linebackers as deep as possible, which creates this gap underneath for Loveland to sit in and then go work after the catch. Like that's another space where he operates in that he can be the guy that goes unnoticed, but is like athletic enough to turn a 10-yard catch into a 20-yard gain. And he just overall, like, he understands scramble. Like this was from early, we ran this play earlier just to show Caleb, but like for this one, Colston Loveland is really good at understanding where to move to open space and where to work with Caleb. You can see him look back. He sees Caleb start to take off. He sees the open space, works toward it, and he's fast enough to run away from a safety, be open, and make a catch downfield. And then
one thing that I think a lot of people are curious about too is like, okay, he obviously has some good skills. Is this a guy, because the separation of all the top tight ends from each other, from the other tight ends that are more like average or good or above average, is pretty wide, right? Like we've seen a guy like Trey McBride who just stands out, like incredible. We've seen it in the past with Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews when he was kind of at the height of his career as well.
Yeah.
Other players, Tony Gonzalez in the past. From your perspective, do you think that Loveland has that capability to be one of these like elite receiving tight ends, or is he still, or is it wait and see? We don't know what we've got yet. Like he's really good, but he may not become an elite receiving tight end.
I think he does and is an elite receiving prospect as a tight end and does probably deserve to be treated as like top 5 tight end, top 5 to 7 going forward. I think again, like his development has opened up so much in this offense. Like you saw it against San Francisco in a lot of those clips. Like he now offers such a big mismatch for Ben Johnson to pivot to, in that they have Durham Smythe, they have Cole Kmet, and then they have Colston Loveland at tight end. All three of whom, Kmet and Smythe, are pretty good at blocking. Loveland's a really good downfield threat, and Kmet can operate underneath and is a pretty good underneath guy to have as a tight end. And I think like Loveland becoming available, turning into a good route runner and a good intermediate threat now allows Chicago to go heavier more often. And it gives them, like, I wonder if this week against Detroit, if they try to go heavier, because he offers that mismatch against base defenses that like you see Los Angeles kind of going after. Now they do it more with trying to get mismatched for their receivers, but like now with LA having Ferguson, they've started to develop more where they have a tight end who's a threat too. And it kind of works the same with Chicago in that they now have Odunze and they have Burden and they have DJ Moore, all of whom they can attach to a 13 personnel. And then you get Loveland. So Loveland is going to be used heavily in the offense. And I think his role is going to continue to grow because of what he offers as a route runner downfield and what he offers in like a speed department as a tight end too. Because I mean, even on like this out and up that he had last week, you can see that he like both in his route running ability, just the little things that he does of like running it out and up. He gives eyes back to the line of scrimmage, which is able to hesitate guys a little bit, which creates space upfield for him and continues to push upfield. He's able to run away from the linebacker as well. And so like he's It's what you're seeing in all of these young Chicago receivers, tight ends in Loveland and Odunze and in Burden, is that they're doing the little things in route running better. And it's what's helping them create so much more separation later in the year. And it's also what's opening up so much over the middle of the field. That along with their ability to work play action with how well their run game's been working.
Yeah. The challenge that I see from a fantasy perspective, and sometimes these things work themselves out if a player is truly elite, but can he become a top 2 target earner in their offense? And like we just talked about Burden, we talked about Rome. It's just hard. It's
Yeah.
hard when you have other like elite prospects in the offense that could just stand out. So I kind of like I don't want to say he's the same as Laporta, but I kind of think about it similarly where some games you're going to have the game lean towards this player and sometimes you're going to have this game lead towards the other player, whereas a McBride is just so clearly so much better than every other option that they have on their offense
Yeah.
that he's just going to be involved all the time. And so to me it's like situational, and some teams have the capability to be more situational because they have so many good options. And that's not a bad thing for Loveland. Like he's a good player, and it presents the opportunity that like if a Rome is injured or Burton is injured, you could be the top 2 target earner for an extended amount of time. But maybe when those guys are in the offense, it's just going to be a rotation of like, this is Burton's game, this is Rome's game, this is Loveland's game. You'll also notice that I didn't mention DJ Moore. I want to get this out there. We're not going to spend too much time on DJ Moore. We'll go through maybe like a couple plays of his, but to me, DJ Moore was more of like a placeholder player, right? Chicago needed some weapons for what they had going on. They brought him in, they extended him. He's a good NFL player, no doubt. And he was a fine kind of stopgap for them. I don't necessarily think that he's going to be on the team long term now that they've seen what they have in Burden, what they have in Loveland, and that they have enough options, and it's just going to create like too much, not enough. There's just not enough to go around to make all of that work. And it's a great way to get off some salary to potentially move him and maybe perfect the defense a little bit more, patch up some holes that they have there. So I do kind of see him as a guy that they're going to find a way to like naturally like fizzle out, whether it's next year or 2 years from now, or whatever it is. I just don't necessarily see him being a long-term option for them.
So he is out is 2028. So he's on the team. I mean, unless they trade him, which I will push back on that a little bit. I think that DJ Moore is what makes the ceiling for this offense higher than what Detroit ever had. And I think that like having I don't think he's necessarily the long-term answer, but I think while he's here, like he's kind of like a linchpin in that, like having that third threat that isn't always like he probably does turn into a fourth fiddle in a way, but I think he then is like the best fourth fiddle in the NFL kind of thing. And so like I think Ben Johnson has figured out where DJ Moore is most effective, which is what I think that it's what I think Ben Johnson is best at. And like what kind of it kind of touches on what I was saying with like Rome Odunze and like Luther Burden as well, is that like the reason that I think there's volatility for the between the receivers is that Ben Johnson, I think, puts his guys in the best situation possible. And so Rome Odunze is working deep a lot, working over the top, like taking advantage of those opportunities. Luther Burden has the middle of the field, stretch the field a little bit, but then also underneath. And I think what they realized this year that I think the previous Chicago coaches didn't use him as is that he's a big physical receiver in the middle of the field. And that is so valuable for a guy like Caleb who wants to just rip it into the middle of the field as often as possible, put as much speed on the ball, and like challenge contested situations. Like he's not scared to fight. There's not a window that scares Caleb Williams. And I think DJ Moore is what kind of elevates this offense for these next 2 years to like they're legit, like they have all the pieces to be like a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Whereas if you took him away, the offense is still super potent, but like in the sense of like again comparing him to his time in Detroit, DJ Moore being the Tim Patrick role in the offense takes that offense to a like a slight tier above if
Right.
you had DJ Moore in Tim Patrick's spot. And it's because they like they stopped using him as this underneath gadgety throw a 2 yard slant, throw a 2 yard hitch, have him work after the catch. He can work after the catch, but like that's not where he's most effective. And like you can see it in his usage last year. His ADOT was a 7.6. This year it's up to a 12.1. And it's because what they're having him do is they're having him run digs and posts and just threaten the middle of the field and into these open spaces over the top and in the middle of the field. And he's not afraid to take a hit. This is just a good play call against the right defense, but good dagger concept. They like him on that in route on the dagger concepts. And again, he could just win contested situations. Like here, he does just enough to get himself space into that like cover 3 hole there. And then he just is able to go up and make a catch. And I think that's where that, and then like I touched on his physicality, and that's where he's like been a red zone threat this year. And I think will continue to be, is that he's able to be physical in the red zone and win one-on-one against corners and create just enough space to like have an open window if they get man coverage in the red zone. So like, I think I think he was like a much maligned guy because of the role that they put him in last year. And now I just think that he's more of a, there are guys that deserve targets above him, but he's always going to be kind of a consistent, like, he can go 3 for 45. He can go 4 for 40, 4 for 60 yards because he's going to win these. And like, this is a good example of where his route running is really good, is that he understands spacing. He pushes the flat corner out. He pushes the deep safety to flip his hips, breaks back inside, drops the ball. But like, that's where they want him operating because his intermediate and deep route running and his ability to push zones is really good.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to say like he's not a good NFL player. I think he is really good, and we see that through some of our metrics too. Like if you go over the past couple of seasons, he's had a lot of games where he's had really strong like separation scores and stuff too. He can create space for himself. I think this comes down to like just the mechanics of how they need to tool their team.
Yeah.
And to have a really potent offense, like I think they can still have one without DJ Moore.
Yes.
As they continue to develop the receivers, as they continue to get like a lot out of Colston Loveland and develop him more too. Actually, there was a tweet yesterday that like I think Albert Breer said that the Bears seem willing to like shop DJ Moore next year, which I think makes sense from a roster building perspective because of how much of a cap hit he makes up.
Yeah.
And the fact that they seem to have a little bit more access, and it like on paper, it feels like they hit on Luther Burden so far, and they've hit on Colston Loveland, and they feel comfortable with those pieces. So that affords you the ability to say, hey, like we have clear gaps on defense. Their defense like is somewhat strong from an EPA per play perspective because they force so many turnovers. But if you strip out turnovers, which isn't technically fair because some defenses are designed that way, they let up a ton of yards, and we saw it against the 49ers, right? So like, can they leverage that piece to get something better on defense? And DJ Moore would be a great addition to so many teams, especially teams that are like, hey, we don't have like a receiver. Like we don't have like a top receiver. We just have like a mix of guys right now.
Yeah.
Or a team that's like in a similar situation to what Chicago was, where it's like, we're about to draft our franchise quarterback. We need a guy in here so that we can like bridge the gap.
Right.
So the Raiders were actually the match that some people like were saying, because they're going to draft Mendoza, and then, maybe you could do like a Max Crosby and some picks from the Bears side. and offload DJ Moore. I also think like I think like the Bills might be a match too, where it's like, hey, we could really use a guy that's just like a cut above some of our other guys to generate more like room for Josh Allen to like operate and give him like more consistent options than like wide receiver by committee. And we covered them earlier this year. So I just don't know like if he'll be here long term. And I think that's okay for their offense, and it just presents more
Yeah.
opportunity for some of these young guys to do stuff. But that I don't want to take away from the fact that like he's a really good NFL receiver and can do a lot of things for some other teams potentially in the future, and be another guy that like in fantasy you're maybe excited to have if he goes to a team where he's like the number one option. Like if he was on the Bills, I'd be like kind of interested in having him because
Yeah.
he's he would be the clear number one for them.
Yeah. And
So
DJ Moore has the eighth highest cap hit amongst wide receivers next year. So it
yeah,
would probably like, moving off a 28.5 million cap hit next year would open up a lot of movement abilities and, being able to shore up some different places for Chicago. But if they do hang on to him, I do. I think he's a very fun piece in an offense that like understands and remembers like what made him good in the first place. Cause I think like that kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit of like why I feel like of like why DJ Moore was good and was as highly regarded as he was because of the rule that he was kind of put in last year. And this year he's starting to kind of remind people a little bit that like, oh yeah, he is more of an intermediate deep threat guy that can like win as a big body receiver, win contested catch situations. And he's a good route runner. So like overall, that's why this offense is so good is that like all four of those guys, DJ Moore, Rome, Luther Burden, Colston Loveland, all of them are very good route runners who can win consistently one-on-one situations down the field.
coming out of college, he was more of a deep threat than he was like,
Yeah.
hey, we're gonna just like throw him a 2 yard screen and let him go. Like
Right.
I think that was like, hey, we want to get the ball to our best receiver. And this is going back to like the previous Bears regime where it's like we've got Justin Fields and Justin can either throw it deep or we could just design a screen to get the guy to the ball
Right.
to this guy. And so they would just basically say like you're running deep or you're getting a screen or like a really easy like designed play. And it kind of took away from what his actual skill set is, which is, I mean, he can do a lot on the NFL, on the field.
Yeah.
Um, and now like with so many options on the team with Rome and Loveland and Burden and just all of this stuff, I think it's downplayed his like stats. So the like his end numbers are not going to look as good as what they've been in the past. Like he's gotten 1,300 yards before in the NFL. It's
Right.
incredible. But I think if he went to a different situation, maybe not with like a rookie quarterback, but a team that truly needs like a number one receiver, for me, he wouldn't be like a true number one. It wouldn't be like, man, this guy is like the guy that you run everything through. It's not guys that we've talked about before, like CeeDee Lamb or something like that. But like he's a really good receiver, so
Yeah.
he could still get 1,300 yards, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was in the right situation. Before we wrap up, like the passing offense, people are doing like playoff contests and stuff like that. I'm curious what your perspective is on like who the going forward from this point on. Now that we've seen Burden like featured in a game, and Rome coming back potentially this week or in the playoffs, and we've seen DJ Moore have big games too, and Loveland have a big role. Like who, if you were just saying like, I think this is their number one receiver in the playoffs, who would you say it is?
Oh, I mean, honestly, I kind of think it might end up being Loveland. I think that like he provides an outlet and a safety option and something underneath that like is such a value to Caleb. And I mean, like since week 9, I mean, he's been at or above 4 targets every game. And so like he's only gone below 2 yards per route run 3 out of those games. So like I think Loveland ends up being the most consistent guy out of that offense. But I think it really depends on how he comes back. But if Rome Odunze comes back healthy, I think he kind of flips back into his number one role. I think you're going to be. It got lost on the. I think it got lost the growth that he had made, and they had some tough matches in the middle of the season for him against like solid corners, and I think teams that were able to scheme against Caleb well. I think Caleb's grown since grown a decent amount in these 4 games because he's played against like really tough defenses and had to work against some different things that like with Odunze coming back. I think if he's at full health, he drops back in as number 1 and ends up like being the guy that has the most yards for them in the playoffs. But I think Colston Loveland's the guy that's going to get the like a good consistent target share.
The funny thing is I think if you were to ask like 5 different people, you might get 5 different answers.
Yeah,
and that's the good thing about the offense, but also like the challenge when you're doing playoff contests, like to know like who the guy is going to be. For me, it's really tough because I would actually say that it's probably Burden if I trusted the fact that he was going to be on the field consistently. That's the problem, that I just don't know that that's the case. Like, they seem to still like to put Olamide Zaccheaus in. They like to do 12 personnel, and the 2 receivers in 12 personnel might end up being Rome and DJ Moore. Even this past game where Zaccheaus wasn't there and Rome wasn't there, Burden didn't have a 70% plus like route share.
Yeah.
So it's tough to say. Like, when he's on the field, he gets targeted the most. His targets per route run is the highest on the team. We just don't know that he's going to be on the field as often as some of these other guys, and that makes it really challenging. The other challenging part is not knowing the health of Rome when he comes back. Is like, we may not get one game. Like, I know that he's questionable for week 18, but we may not get a game to like understand if he's ramped up or if he needs like more time or if he's playing through something. So it's really a mixed bag. I think if I were to really like put my chips on something, for me, I'm going to say Luther Burden, only because I feel like when you get into playoff situations, they may just have to put him in more because they've seen him do it now. Like, they've seen him have a game where he's like been the focal point and actually kept them in the game by doing some like unique things. But I wouldn't like bet my mortgage on that by any means.
Yeah, them moving a little bit more into heavier personnel is interesting. I think, depending on like how week 18 goes and what Odunze looks like, I think that would be a big kind of like tell. Like this week, I think will be a big tell. I think both teams are going to come in balls to the wall and like for for various different reasons. But I think it's going to be a good like barometer for the Bears offense of how they're going, of how that offense is going to look and like going into the postseason. Because I think if Odunze looks like slow at times, or if like that, because it is a foot issue and those can linger. If he looks a little bit off, I think it does transition to Burden. But that's where I think that Loveland is the kind of the one flying under the radar in a little bit. And then I think that like he continues to get more work in this offense, because I just think that like having a tight end like that ends up being such a value to a quarterback, especially a quarterback like Caleb, because he's so athletic and he does understand zone really well. He understands zones well, and Loveland understands where to work to space well. That like his ability in scramble drill, I think he's like the continued rapport that he's building with Caleb Williams, I think will really shine in the playoffs as teams start to really like dig in and like game plan to stop that intermediate level stuff for the Bears. I think that's where Loveland will rise up a little bit more.
It's underrated for Loveland too. Like, I think I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but he's been like their most consistent third down target too.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of like thoughts behind this. Like, one, Ben Johnson kind of knows the limitations of Caleb and his accuracy issues. Loveland's a big body.
Yeah.
He can generate the space, but he's also got a big frame. Those like errant passes are just less likely to be errant when he's the target, because he's so big.
Yeah.
And he has a bigger frame and catch radius to be able to pull in some balls that some of the other receivers can't. Also, going over the middle of the field, like you mentioned it with DJ Moore, and we saw play with Loveland, like bigger body, harder to bring down. You're not just going to pop the ball loose when a safety like jams him over the middle of the field, unafraid to get hit too. And I think those things are a little bit like underrated when it's a clear pass down situation. Like go to the bigger guy that's generating some space, that has a bigger catch radius than some of the other players. I can see it being Loveland as well. He's also in his like 60 to 70% like route share role right now.
Yeah.
Going into next season, I think you're going to start seeing like Burden and Loveland be in the 70 to 80% range, where some of like the other elite receivers end up being.
Yeah, and because of the variety in this offense, it'll also come down to the defense that they're facing. I mean, I think the reason that you saw so much Loveland this week, and I think the reason that you might see a decent amount of Loveland, or why you saw so much Loveland last week, and why I think you'll see a decent amount of Loveland this week, is that like San Fran matches with base a lot. And the Bears knew they have an advantage against San Fran's base defense. It's something that they hadn't done a ton. They used to be a lot of nickel, but like this year they've been more matching base against heavy personnel. And so like Ben Johnson, I think, sees that as an advantage. Lions do the same thing. So I think that's where you'll see a little bit more heavy personnel from the Bears. But as they get into the playoffs, if they play a team like if they play a team like the Eagles, that's a game where I think you're looking more for the wide receivers. But if they have a possibility to play the Packers, they liked going heavy. They went heavy against the Packers because the Packers match with like their base defense. They usually go with like kind of a 5-2 formation when they're faced with a like 12, 13 personnel. And so that's where I think like, if they play the Packers, Loveland becomes more important. So like that it almost becomes, it's hard to like, you got to kind of play the matchups a little bit to kind of decide who in Chicago ends up being like the high ceiling guy. And it's like looking at the defenses that they're going to go up against will kind of guide, it will give an idea of where the Chicago offense goes as far as like going 11 personnel rather than going heavy. Cause like, if you go back to like even their game against Baltimore, they went a lot more 11 personnel against Baltimore. Just because Baltimore be with Kyle Hamilton, there's not as much value in working as much run game out of heavy when Kyle Hamilton is like that, interior pass defender, but like being able to do it against San Fran where you're working against the San Fran linebackers, things like that. So like that's where I think it'll be really telling is in who they're playing rather than just trying to like guess from the beginning. Is like, I think at Green Bay, I like it would be like Loveland because you don't know how long, long Chicago's going to be in there. It would be like, but probably Loveland week 1.
Yeah. The other thing that's challenging about it is like they've just had injuries to Rome and then Zacchaeus being out last week, and you just don't know if that's dictating personnel also. Like we know that Ben Johnson's kind of a genius, but we also don't know if like, okay, well, we only have 4 active receivers this game. One of them is Devin Duvernay, and I don't want him on the field.
Right.
Like, am I just going to go 12 for this game? And, my 2 receivers will be like Burden and DJ Moore or Moore and Jade Walker last week sometimes. Yeah. And then we're going to go with Matt and Loveland on the field more often. Like some of that could be dictated based off of that. Like, so it's so up in the air. I agree that like if Rome is healthy, that he'll be on the field a lot. He'll probably be a consistent option. And then Loveland will likely sit in his role of like somewhere between 60 to 80% like route share on a given week, just depending on how they decide like who they're playing and what matchups they like in that.
Yeah. But I do think Loveland gets incorporated more at 11 personnel. So like that also I think will end up helping him too, but I just think that I think Loveland ends up being kind of just the consistent tight end is a quarterback's best friend kind of thing.
Yeah. All right. We talked a lot about the pass offense, but the Bears have actually shown that they're probably one of the most efficient running teams in the NFL this year. They retooled their offensive line completely, basically took it down to studs other than I think Darnell Wright's a leftover, but I'm nearly certain that like three or four other pieces are completely different this year.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, drafting Kyle Monangai in round 7, keeping DeAndre Swift and putting him into this offense, bringing the reunion with Ben Johnson. They've ended up finding fireworks because this run offense is legit. It's a top efficient run offense in the NFL. What are some of the reasons behind that? What are you seeing on film that you've seen that is just kind of unique? Has Ben Johnson brought some of the same kind of traits that he had in Detroit and brought it over to Chicago, or is he doing it a different way?
No, it's Ben Johnson. One of his calling cards is that he has a very versatile run game, a very multiple run game. It's it's not really easy to pin down the tendencies and what the Bears like to run in general. I think they throw a lot at defenses, but one of the big things is that I think DeAndre Swift has been running his hardest that I've ever seen in his career. Monangai has been running really hard too, and I think that's a credit to the enemy, who's the running backs coach there. He has them working downhill immediately, which was always like if you were to go back and watch some of DeAndre Swift when he was in Philly or even when he was in Detroit, you saw a lot of like indecisiveness and not the greatest vision. Where when he was downhill and good, but there'd be a lot of times where he'd get caught up at the line of scrimmage and he would play around a little bit and it would end up getting snuffed out and he was boom or bust. Whereas now he's working downhill fast and like you can see it in like some of these runs where like he's not stretching things out. He's planting his foot and going, and it's downhill quick now, and it's decisive and it's shoulders down and it's go. And then this play also kind of starts to illustrate that. The other big thing is that by his own luck and probably his own scouting, Ben Johnson realized that he has his own Penei Sewell in Chicago. Darnell Wright probably does, like, he's been getting talked up a lot this year, but like after watching all of this, I don't know if he's being talked about enough as the weapon that he's been in the run game. I mean, as their right tackle, the Bears obviously like to go right a little bit more. Their splits between running left and running right are hilarious, and it's because Darnell Wright kind of operates that run game and is the key to their run game. Running right, DeAndre Swift has 122 carries this year. He averages 5.39 yards per carry. He has an 8% explosive run rate, and he averages 2.99 yards before contact. Monangai, running right, 86 carries, 5.26 yards per carry, 7% explosive run rate, 2.86 yards before contact per attempt. That's like elite level running back production right there, running to the right. And if you compare that to going to the left, so it has 64 carries, so it's 122. It's basically a 2 to 1 ratio of running right to running left, but 64 carries, 4.5 yards per carry, 1.6% explosive run rate, and 2.36 yards before contact. It's more jarring for Monangai, who has 43 carries to the left this year, 3.95 yards per carry, 2.3% explosive run rate, and 1.42 yards before contact per attempt. So every aspect of their metrics drop way down running left compared to right, and it's because on the right side they have
right on right.
And they've got Joe Tooney at right guard, who's one of the best right guards. How they got him is it was a great signing on their part, and then they also have the Darnell Wright, they use him as kind of the lead to drive their run scheme. This play is going to be a run to the left, but they get Darnell Wright in motion. They get him singled up on a linebacker, and then it just creates a massive gap where everybody else works their double teams. Tooney drives down, creates space on the defensive tackle, and then you get Darnell Wright running in space. And that's what they want to do. They want to get him in space. They love to do that. And
how many offensive linemen do you see being able to be like that agile to get up to the second level that quickly, easily, and pulling and doing stuff like that? Like I think that's not every team has that, right? Like this is kind of a unique, very talented player.
Yeah, this is like elite level athleticism for a guy this big. There's probably 3 to 5 guys on the planet that can do this. And I think, I would say it's like Trent Williams, Penei Sewell, Darnell Wright, Lane Johnson are
Yep.
probably the 3. And it's like, he can get out in space, and he can, Ben Johnson, again, he designs a great scheme, but like the ability for them to get Darnell Wright out, he blows up a guy, and just the way that he drives this offense and drives the way they run. This is Monangai here, but if you watch Darnell Wright, like he is able to seal that defender, get up to a second defender. Like he is constant, like if he gets on a double team, if he's by himself, like the guy that he's on is consistently 4 to 5 yards down the field. And that's just what's been making this run game so efficient, is that they have an absolute strength in their right guard and their right tackle, and working one-on-one and working on double teams that they can just bully guys. And, I think this is a duo run, but they have the guy 6 yards down the field before DeAndre Swift is even potentially touched. And it's it's because you can see DeAndre Swift is just downhill right now, fast, decisive, one cut. Whereas before, I think it was a lot more playing around at the line of scrimmage, but they just are able to just wash things down. He helps create cutback lanes on runs to the left, where, I think that it probably is for outside zone left. The Bears, Monangai and Swift are looking for that cutback a lot more because of that right side's ability to wash down the opposite side defensive line. And that's where they've been excelling, is just that they have an absolute super weapon in Darnell Wright, and they've got 2 running backs that will just hit their gap and go. And
How surprised are you about one, DeAndre Swift being able to kind of change his game to be able to do some of these things, and then 2, the fact that they found a 7th round rookie in Kyle Monangai to be able to do this also?
Yeah, I think Brett says it all the time that running backs don't matter, and I'm in that camp a little bit. I think a really good running back elevates a game, but for running backs 8 to 10 through 60, it's situation and offensive scheme. And so for Swift, I think this evolution is what's taking him to be not an elite back, but realizing what his full potential was, is that he's been really good in the pass game, but then where his ability to turn into a downhill runner, a one cut downhill runner, is what is really what he always should have been. But I just don't think he ever, whether it be a million things, he had a lot of injuries when he was younger. And so, nerves about hurting himself, but and now having a really good offensive line for the first time in his career. Well, I mean, in Philly he did too, but really having a scheme and an offensive line that it feels really comfortable in, that he
this was kind of
before.
This was kind of his last chance too. If you think about it, the Bears have a potential out after this year too, with $1.3 million of dead cap. There's an opportunity for them to have moved on. If things just didn't work out, it's not a big deal. 1.3 mil, get rid of the guy and potentially draft somebody or find somebody in free agency that fits your scheme better.
Yeah.
They seem to like Monangai too, because they're basically rotating drives, and then sometimes situationally, they'll leave one guy in versus the other.
Yeah.
But to me, based off of the contract, and the way that he's played this year, I think they'll probably just bring him back and then see if they can find a way to find another 1A, 1B situation for the future. I think beyond his 2026 season, I don't know that he'll be on the Bears anymore, just because I don't know that they're going to value the position enough to say hey, we definitely need to bring this guy back. But I actually do think that they'll want to keep him around, because they've seen some really this offense he has done a lot of really nice things for this offense sometimes this season, things that I don't think Kyle Monangai can do because DeAndre Swift has more speed and quickness and is just somewhat of a better receiver. Monangai's dropped the ball quite a bit this year and is just not a great route runner. So I think he just brings something a little bit different. But I still think Monangai has a place and role in this offense, like being the one cut and go uphill and like lowering your shoulder and like bruising some of the defense as well. Like I think those are the types of things that Monangai does better.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like that's a role in the offense. Um, but DeAndre Swift's ability to have more like game breaking type of plays and presenting himself as a little bit more of like a receiver out of the backfield, I think buys him another season with the team. And then, maybe he gets another contract somewhere else for like a year, 2 years. Just he's going to be 28 at that point. So like, I think, I'm thinking about it from a fantasy, like dynasty, like all that kind of stuff angle. Like he's a good player right now. He's in a really good situation too. He's got a great coach, great designed run game with a solid offensive line too. But I'm kind of like thinking maybe you run it back for one more season. So from a dynasty angle, like you've got that extra year. But I think in 2027, he could go back to being a pumpkin. You don't know where he's going to go. You don't know his situation. Like this might just be like the match made in heaven for him, where somebody knew his faults. They got a good running back coach. They fixed him a little bit. They built the offensive line. It matched his skill set a little bit. They put him in a role where he doesn't have to like have the ball for like 80% of the carries. It's like more of like a 60-40 split. And
Yeah.
it's just worked out really well for him. And I don't know that that's going to happen when he goes to a different situation in the future. For the playoffs, like I could see them using him a little bit more than they've been kind of splitting drive by drive. Like I could see them doing more of like a 65-35 split, just knowing that he's like more of the speedster and
Yeah.
short area type, like quickness type of stuff. Like I think they don't want to like run him into the ground because of his injury history, and they know that he's a little bit better than Monangai at least, and has the ability to break something big. But they've just been kind of like, all right, we can do this. It's not that much of a difference. Let's do a 1A, 1B kind of split, 60-40, and just play it that way. And I agree with you. I'm a running backs don't really matter type of guy. Like even your team, the Detroit Lions, have Jahmyr Gibbs. I think he's like just incredible. But even in from my perspective, like I just taking a guy at I think it was like pick 10 or something like that.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of capital to give up for a position that you can get like pretty solid play from a guy in the second or third or fourth round. Like it just to
Yeah.
me
And
is tough to think through.
I think as far as his long-term projection in the offense, DeAndre Swift is there until he isn't. And
Yeah.
what I mean by that is that it's kind of the same thing as it was in Detroit. Like I hate continuing to make the comparisons because it just feels cliche, but like what he's going to be there until they find someone better. I think that, it's going to be one of those where they're taking shots at a running back consistently at a guy that they like mid rounds. I doubt they'll ever throw, because of where they'll likely pick unless they make trades. A top tier running back in the first round like Detroit did is probably not like it's much of a possibility. But like I think they'll continue to. I think it'll be one of those where they'll throw darts and they'll throw at like mid round guys that they see value in. And I think he probably, I don't know. Yeah, I think he probably sticks around for like a 1 or 2 year contract because I imagine they'll restructure or do something with his contract because he's due for like a $9 million cap hit next year. And his out is after 2026. So he's probably around for next year. But then after that, I think it's one of those where he's still only 26 he's only 26 after this year. Sorry. And the out is actually after this season. So like, I think that they probably bring him back for on a 1 or 2 year deal. And then they're working to replace him in those next 2 years. And that probably somewhat spells the end for him in a way, just because I think at that point, 28, it'll be tough, but like he'll always have usefulness, but he's not going to get usurped until they find someone more athletic than him. I think that with the way he's run this year, he's shown that like he has taken the step that Ben Johnson even wanted to see when he was in Detroit that caused them to move off of him, and why Detroit ended up going with Jimmy, like trying to take that leap on Jahmyr Gibbs. And with DeAndre Swift showing the ability to be more decisive at the line of scrimmage, it just like it increases his staying power in Chicago. But I still think that it's one of those where they'll continue to kind of throw that they'll, over the next, probably not this year, but like the year after, they'll start to do a little middle round, like trust their scouting and go after like a super athletic guy out of the backfield that can complement Kyle Monangai in the way that Swift does now.
Yeah. I'm also thinking about like playoff contests that people are going to be doing. And, some contests are where you have to pick one player from each team. For me, like if you're picking a Bears player and you think the Bears are going to last more than one game, to me, it's more of like I would probably pick DeAndre Swift. If you were trying to think contrarian, we talked about some options too, like Burden and Loveland being some options for you. I don't think that like Monangai is the guy that they're like, hey, we're going to give him the ball for sure on the goal line. Like I think that they just kind of rotate and they're okay with it being Swift or they're okay with it being Monangai. But to me, the person that has like the most, I think the person that has the most like potential opportunity in the playoffs that's going to be consistent. Like the Bears operate really well when their run game's strong. I think it's going to be DeAndre Swift. If you thought that they were going to make a really deep push into the playoffs, like he's the guy that you probably want. Now he'll probably also be the guy that has the strongest ownership of any of the options too. So like your contrarian plays to me are, one, people are going to be scared about Rome Odunze, especially if he doesn't play this upcoming week. Two, Luther Burden, because people are unsure about how much route share he's going to get. But we know that when he's on the field, he gets the ball a lot. And then three, Colston Loveland maybe being the most consistent option because he's probably going to play 60 to 80% of the routes. And then like he's just a quarterback's best friend, running a lot of friendly routes and getting open, big catch radius, a guy that they seem to go to in critical situations on third down in near the end zone too. I mean, there's basically all we did was rule out Monangai and DJ Moore for you, but at the very least, like there's some talking points that we may have given you to think through for your playoff options. For me, I would pick DeAndre Swift if I think the Bears are going far. I think that they'll probably win their first game and lose in the second round to the Eagles, but that's kind of where I have them dying.
That's where I think that they might. And like DeAndre Swift just might be a guy to potentially kind of stay away from just a little bit, just because if the Bears get Green Bay potentially, how it would play out right now, Green Bay's got a pretty good run defense, and I think with Micah Parsons out, push the Bears offense to lean more pass against Green Bay. And then in the next round, unless the Rams beat the Eagles, they'd be staring down the barrel of playing either Seattle or the winner of Carolina, Tampa Bay. I think it goes Seattle. And then that's another matchup that's really tough in the run game. Seattle's run defense has been really good. Other than like one game against the Rams, they've been really good. So I lean to kind of like stay away from I would stay away from the like Bears running backs if possible. I think there's probably some better options out there, but yeah, I mean, Swift would be the guy to go with, but I don't know. I think this will be a big playoffs for, really big for Caleb Williams, because I think that the matchups that they end up getting in the NFC kind of push him to need to be more, need the Bears to go like more pass heavy, just because that's the weakness of the defense, and they'll use the run game to set up the pass game, but like the run game, I don't think will be super efficient.
The hard thing is we don't really know who they're going to play. They can be the 2 seed or 3 seed.
Yeah.
They can play against a number of different teams. So they have the opportunity to play against the Packers, who are locked into the 7.
Yep.
They can still play the 49ers, and they can play the Rams.
Yeah.
Any of those options are on the table. The 49ers, I feel like we would maybe get a repeat, like a little bit of a tighter, like I don't think we're going to see a 40-point game, but so maybe like a 30-point game, a tighter game. in that way, but I think it would still be pretty high scoring because I don't really believe in either of these defenses too much. Like
Yeah.
they're they're not they have a lot of big holes in the secondary, both teams
Yeah.
do. So from that perspective, it is really matchup dependent, but I do think
Yeah.
the Bears offense does perform its best when it's built off the ground game and then playing off play action. And so you've got to at least like set that up in some way. And then the underrated part is like the conditions as well. Like we're getting into January, and if they were the 2 seed, like the first 2 rounds would be where they are.
Yeah.
And it's called the Windy City for a reason. It's technically not because it's windy, but I'm not going to let everybody know that. But and that's the one thing that like kind of trips me up too is like I think that from a play calling perspective, they may have to lean a little bit more like run balanced because one, they like to play that way anyway, and
Yeah.
two, the conditions may just lend itself to that. And it's hard to know, right? Like we don't know forecasts like 2 weeks in advance. We have some idea, but at the same time, like forecasts are even wrong like 24 hours ahead of it in
Right.
advance. So that's the challenging part too. And then if they did make the NFC Championship game, it's very possible that they would be hosting that too if they're the 2 seed,
Yeah.
because it could be that Seattle or the 49ers end up losing before they get there. So being in Chicago, I think, is such a challenge for passing games and sometimes, but I guess we'll see. I'm gonna say that the contests that I usually play in, like ownership is a factor. So like
Yeah.
I would lean away from DeAndre Swift because I'm trying to get a little bit contrarian and figure out my way of doing that. And my contrarian play is still TBD depending on what I see from the offense this week. And if Rome is back, I would probably lean that way. But if we see him and he looks limited, I might lean Burden instead. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure off the top of my head right now. All right, we covered a lot, bunch of different topics. Do you have anything else that you wanted to mention, just like a closing thought on this offense in general?
No, just that like I think it's Ben Johnson has proven, and like both in his scheme and in the development of these guys, that like he is a top offensive mind. I think the amount of switch ups, the way he's able to manipulate defenses and create open opportunities for this offense, and then combined with like what he has in Caleb Williams as a quarterback and just the elite intangibles and arm strength, like you really are starting getting to see Ben Johnson like flex his muscles. And I think it's only going to continue to grow. I really think that this whole playoff run ends up coming down to what their defense can do. If their defense can continue to create turnovers, I think this is a team that can win the Super Bowl. But I think this offense is going to go out and put out 24, 28 points a game. So, and it's just going to be like, all right, here's the standard defense. If you can keep the other team under that, we're going to be fine. If not, it'll be a shootout and we'll see what happens. But like, I really do think that this is like, it's a Super Bowl contending team just because of the havoc they create and because of the offensive structure that they have and the way that they can attack in so many ways. It's going to be really fun to watch. And like, it's going to be entertaining no matter what because of the guy that's behind center and Caleb Williams. There's something crazy is going to happen almost assuredly at some point, whether good or bad. I like, as much as I tried to fight it off because I, in my own fandom don't like the Bears, but in watching as an unbiased viewer, like this is going to be a really fun team to watch in the playoffs and like has legitimate like aspirations at a Super Bowl in a year where it doesn't feel like there's a powerhouse team.
Yeah, I think they're underrated. I think a lot of people are like, even if you look at like the betting odds, their odds to win the NFC are fifth, I think, which is pretty scary to think through. And I agree with you that it's just up in the air. Like, I like the Seahawks. I like the Rams. I think they both have pretty strong. I think they both have holes in their teams have holes. The Eagles have holes also. We've seen their offense just kind of go to absolute crap sometimes. The 49ers have no defense. This is just what we're seeing. There's no complete team out there.
Yeah.
So, someone can get hot and run the table. And the Bears have the firepower on offense to potentially do something like that. The one thing that I'll also mention is that the storylines that you could get in their first round matchup. You either get the most likely things are they're either playing the Packers or the 49ers. And in those situations, they played 2 last minute games with the Packers, and they played a last second game with the 49ers and was probably a contender for game of the year. I'd still probably rank the Seahawks Rams game above it that we saw a couple weeks ago, but it was, a 40-point game from the 49ers. And like, it would have been a 40-point game if there was a couple extra seconds on the clock for the Bears too. So we would see fireworks in that scenario. And doing playoff contests and stuff too, matchups matter so much. You see the Bears and 49ers playing against each other. Even if you don't think the Bears are going very far, the amount of points that may be scored in that game could be really interesting from a fantasy angle for those like playoff contests that you're doing, just because get a really big shootout. I think it's really interesting to think through that. But if we don't have anything else, we're going to sign off. We did an hour and 45-minute podcast. We're going to do an hour. If you guys aren't already following us, we got at CallMeSteve07 and at Dhanani Zain. Thank you guys so much for listening. We're going to continue next week to go through playoff matchups and talk about playoff contests a little bit too, and some players that we like from the different teams. And we'll also kind of feature another team next week, but we'll do maybe a little bit more of an abbreviated style and then go through different matchups more detail as well. So for the Cutup, Zain and Steve, we're signing off. Good to see everybody.